There you are, that proves it. Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to those who've never been before, and to those who come sometimes, and especially to those who come all the time. Daud, I can't see you. Daud? Oh, hi there, Fika.
Hello, Ron. How are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you. I made it.
I'm very pleased
Thank
indeed.
You. Thank you.
Hi, Daud. How are you? Can you hear me? And I can hear you. Excellent, excellent. And now the hellos are over and we're off. So yes, so welcome, etc., etc. I'm going to remind those who've never been how we work, but anyway, in a minute. So ostensibly, you all had the freedom to attend this meeting that I.
So how would you know that you shouldn't have to?
Could those talking either stop or mute or both? Thank you. Okay, so I had you had the freedom to attend the meeting that I set up. Isaac, I can hear you. Okay, but note that once I publicized it, my freedom was very much diminished. Isaac? Thank you. So freedom, like everything else, is relative.
Ron, sorry to interrupt you. You have a way that you can mute everyone.
Ron, I think everyone is muted now.
Especially Ron is muted, but this might be an advantage.
Ron, you're muted. We can't hear you. Melinda, you're muted also.
Okay. That's it. Calm down, everybody. Calm down. It's about freedom. You're not free to interrupt me yet. Okay? Freedom is over for the time being. So my question is, if what I said was that freedom seems to be relative. So is relative freedom freedom? And is relative truth the truth? Is relative reality real? So those are questions. Now, by the way, I suggest that you do the old-fashioned thing and have paper and pencil or pen and paper, because I'm going to throw a lot of bombs at you, and I have to speak fast because I've got only a short time to do this before you start. And so I'm going to throw bombs, and you might have questions to ask on the very, very few things that I do say, as usual. So when I first started these meetings, I gave absolute freedom to interrupt. That was a huge mistake. It led to my non-freedom, and in fact, the freedom of the minority resulting in the non-freedom of the majority. And I'm always the majority. So so that was terrible. On the first 2 or 3 meetings, I just had to say one sentence, and somebody interrupted me. So I never said really anything that I wanted to say, and I decided that we can't do it that way. So I'm going to speak for a relatively short time. I have never yet, by the way, said everything I wanted to say. Not for a year and a half. I've never succeeded. And now and again, I've done half, and often I've only done a third, but you don't know what I haven't said. So that's an advantage. But anyway, so my own freedom is put to the test when I consider how to set up these meetings, knowing I won't cover all that I want to. So I have to decide where I start, and I have to decide my freedom is what is the order and where is the break. So I'm free to decide, but unfree to carry it out. So in modern times, freedom is the deepest, most prevalent issue within humans. All in all, freedom is about being human. So perhaps the title of this meeting should be The Struggle or the Urge for Freedom. Right? The urge for freedom is the urge to separate ourselves from the encumbrance of our humanity, or perhaps it's a way of showing what it means to be human. Whichever it is, freedom or the concept of freedom is an integral part of being human. The continual urge, the fight to be free. Just to give you a spoiler, my whole thing tonight will be to show you that you're not free. So that's the spoiler. Okay. Hegel's idea of freedom is not what you have, it's what you are. When there is no freedom, you don't exist as a human being, so he said. But that's not how I see it. We don't have freedom, yet we are human. To be human is the dissonance or the conflict between our belief that we have freedom and our obviously not being free. That is an inner struggle. Time, by the way, which is the fulcrum of what I'm saying today, is the enemy of freedom. Oh, hi, Olga. I can't see you though, but I know you're here. Okay. Time is the enemy of freedom. We move inexorably forward from birth towards death. There's no stopping that. There's no freedom from that. Yet we move backwards to the past, which I have to explain for those who have not read my book, Time to Tell, where I explain this in length, how I get to the theory of time. I'm now going to tell you in about 3 minutes, in a very, very few sentences. What we generally believe and feel is that here we are now in the present, and we have the past that's gone and finished with, and then we have the future that is still to come. But I don't. That's not possible. What we have is that when something happens like this, when that happens, it's already gone. It's already in the past. So there is no now. There is no present. However much we liked to feel we are here now, we're not. We were, and it keeps on going back. And as that goes back, there's more of it coming in. And the further back our present, which never existed, occurs, more and more memories come in. We are creating memories, and the memories are our past. That's all we have. And the reason and we never get to the future ever. We can't. The future that we think is going to happen is always based on the past. And since the past keeps on going back and becomes wilder and further away and more strange, so our future becomes less possible. So we never, ever get to the future, never. There is no such thing as a prediction. It can't happen. We think things will happen, and They sometimes do, they sometimes don't, but it's always based on what's happened in the past. So we are imprisoned by our memories, even when they are false memories, and most of our memories are false in some way. So even when we've forgotten the past, we are likely to be reminded of it. And there's a whole lot of stuff going on about people being told that they said terrible things, or they wrote terrible things a few years ago. It's a new sport, digging into people's past and bringing it up, even people that don't remember what they said, etc. So even freedom of a past private life is violated. Freedom is always thought of in terms of the future. It's the possibility, the alleged possibility of moving to the future, but not the future of predicting, not the freedom of predicting the future, since the future is based on an uncertain past. That's the reason we can remember the past, but not the future. We'll never get to it, never. The future will become the past as soon as we get to what we thought was the future. Okay, are you all still with me? I'm very pleased. You do need to get the book, because those are a few sentences on a very, very long journey to get to that point. Okay, so our freedom is curtailed by our always being in the past. In fact, our movement towards the future is actually a movement to the past. All we've got, folks, is the past. Whatever we feel, it's the past that's with us, and it's always weird because it's always changing. So we have, and that's why, by the way, everything is approximate, but that's another story. That's for another time. We have no freedom to imagine. Imagination has the limits of our human character that is bound up in our memories. We cannot imagine what we can't imagine. Think about that for a second. We can't imagine what we can't imagine. We aren't free to not imagine that which is non-visualizable. And I'll give you an example. Atoms, which were discovered by Democritus in about 450 BC, which by hypothesis is the result of division to the last possible stage. They can't in themselves undergo any changes after that. Now that is something which we can't visualize, and you can talk about it, but you can't visualize it. And so when scientists began to use the concept of atoms more, they had to find a way of putting it down. So what they did was they gave it a picture, which is the atom, okay, a central attracting mass surrounded by rings of rotating atoms. But that does not exist as such. But something had to be put down, and the only way you can do it is to use our poor imagination, because that's what we can imagine. And by the way, the same happens in quantum mechanics, where so-called waves and particles are simply a way of describing what we can understand. That's all. There are no points of particles. There aren't. But we can only think of them as points. So we humanize notions that we can't conceive. I got a good crowd tonight. Einstein described scientific theories as free inventions of the human mind. He is an example of that not happening, by the way. He had a great mind, but his findings didn't come from nowhere. They weren't free inventions. Imagination is based on the past that allows us to expand what we already know, but it's all based on what we've already got. The metaverse, those who are were with me last month, we talked about the metaverse, okay, is ostensibly gives you greater freedom to maneuver, but in fact closes you in a wall built by the designers. The greater the freedom, the thicker and higher the wall. 1 second. With those who do not have your cameras on, please put them on. Thank you. Please now. Well, everybody's got freedom not to listen to me, I can see. Can you please put your cameras on? Great, thank you very much. There are another 4 without cameras. I do like to see you all, and I think it's nicer that we all see you. Okay, so freedom depends on who is in your bubble, basically. The larger the bubble, the less the freedom. For example, freedom of parts of countries to be independent. So you've got Scotland, the UK, you've got Catalonia in Spain, and you've got all the states of the United States of America that might want to be free and are not and can't. Catalonia, for example, wants freedom to not teach more in Spanish than in Catalan, the Catalan language, against the Spanish government instructions. There's a continual fight of wanting to be more free, and you can't. And that happens with all of us and countries and everything. Everybody wants to break away and can't, and is frustrated. Knowledge is ostensibly a path to freedom for more knowledge, but the expansion of knowledge leads to knowing more and more about less and less, as you realize. By doing that, we restrict the knowledge that we're ostensibly expanding. We are gradually boxing ourselves in so that eventually we'll each be separated from everyone else through the knowledge that we can't share. We're in trouble, folks. The more we know, the less we can share, basically. Everybody talks about woke culture. I'm not going to go much into that because it's pretty boring. Everybody's talking about it all the time. But there are amazing things happening in this woke culture, of which I can only go into 1 or 2. For example, Latin and Greek are under attack from American left-wingers, denouncing them as the fount of racism. I mean, that is incredible to me. There's a professor of classic at Princeton University argues that the discipline has been used for 2,000 years as a justification for slavery. I mean, really, Latin and Greek. So slavery, colonialism, and fascism. He said he hopes it will disappear. Can you imagine what we lose by not teaching Latin and Greek for those who like that sort of thing? I mean, really, it's beyond me, but I suppose anyway. A high school in Massachusetts removed Homer's Odyssey from the curriculum. A teacher in the school denounced the work as trash. The Odyssey, right? Amazing. Strangely, anti-woke is a sort of anti-intellectualism. I don't know if they realize that. So we've lost the freedom to see the world of the past other than from the confines of our present culture. But we've never had the freedom. History is always seen from the most recent past that we call now. Simon Sebag Montefiore calls it the temptation to see the past through the obsessions of the present. While these Talmudic words are apt, we do not see things as they are, but as we are. On the other hand, we have nostalgia, where we see the world due to our past, but use that to change the past into a better past. Wasn't the past always better, folks? It was always sunny, it never rained, and the days went on, etc., etc. That's nostalgia. But but in any case, in all senses, we are trapped in the past. Our freedom never extended to the present because there isn't a present. There isn't a present. That's why it's happening. But what about rationality? We're all rational people, right? Spinoza, who had a lot to say about rationality, he said, freedom is when you become rational, having broken away from others' ideas. He stated in his ethics that we are free when we break away from our feelings, from our own body, from our emotional attachments. By the way, Kant noted that we must view ourselves as free when we engage in practical reasoning. But back to Spinoza, his big thing, the reason he was excommunicated at the time was that God and nature are one. Okay, and when we become one with nature, we are completely free. Well, from my point of view, this is dubious. Sorry, Spinoza. It's dubious. But we are being asked to lose ourselves. By becoming one with nature, we lose us. There are people still without cameras. I would love to see, and so would we all. But anyway, so, but we are asked to lose ourselves, not to be individual, and to not know that we are. But that state of being doesn't make us free. If we don't know we are free, are we free? Surely we can only know that we are free if we understand what not free is. Are you with me, everybody? It's wonderfully quiet because yeah, that's what I wanted, I forgot. Wonderful. Okay, so I would ask you if there are any questions, but I won't. It will unleash a torrent. Just hang on, folks, hang on. All right, so Sartre said that never were we freer than under the German occupation. That's amazing, right? His core insight was that it is only when we are physically stopped from acting that we fully realize the true extent and nature of our freedom. Interesting. If he is right, then the COVID pandemic is an opportunity to relearn what it means to be free. And perhaps it is. Our so-called freedom is the theory, the ideal of what freedom would be like. Putting it another way, it's a matter of not knowing what you have until it's gone. In my terms, those who know what I think about nothing and nothingness, which I can't go in now, nothingness, the absence of something that is apparent and real. Nothingness is real, and when it's gone, you feel it. Okay, there is another freedom. There's another freedom that Martin Heidegger mentions, that constant anxiety doesn't lend itself to freedom. Anxiety in the face of death is the underlying structure of being human, he says. The underlying structure of being human, of the self. The freedom, he says, is to accept the certainty of nothing, the certainty of death, well, which is pretty rough. Freedom, in fact, is to get away from yourself. Now, my question is, would we be freer if that anxiety wasn't present? Would we be freer if we didn't know that we die? If we never die, would we be freer? With no end, perhaps we'd be stuck in not having to do anything, because we'd know it's not coming to an end. So why bother, right? Actually, I must tell you, I prefer a world in which people are afraid of dying. Just imagine the lunatics that we'd have if they were not afraid of dying. That's just my little thing. Okay, so Socrates said, since we're talking about the self, know thyself, he said. But can we be free to know ourselves? What did he mean? What can it mean to know ourselves? I mean, we are subjective beings. We don't know other people, that's fair enough. But why would we know ourselves better than we know other people, since we're completely subjective in knowing ourselves? What can we know? We can only know that we are great, we are wonderful, we look great in the mirror, but looking in the mirror doesn't mean anything because we have no idea how anybody sees us other than the way we see ourselves. So I don't know exactly what it means to know thyself. Sartre said, we are free to slam our hands on a nail to show our absolute freedom. It's true. You can bang your head on glass, on a nail, and you're free. You'll be pretty stupid, but you're proving that you're free. By the way, we are as free to sleep in the streets as a homeless person is. Are we both as free as each other? We're both free to do that. A thought. Okay. There is something we discussed for, believe it or not, 3 hours about a year ago. I am what I am. It is what it is, if you remember that. It's a seemingly vacuous, superficial statement, but is it? Is it really vacuous? Does it mean anything? But it's circular. That's the point. It is a circle around us, enclosing us within our subjectivity, a microcosm of the human situation. It's restrictive but real. I am what I am because I can't be anything else other than what I am. That is not freedom. I can't be anything else than what I am. We're stuck. We're stuck. There's no freedom, even though we feel there is. But that's part of the problem. A different or perhaps similar question is whether we can be free from ourselves, and that's part of Eastern philosophy says yes. But how can we be when we're part of society? Look, we're in an information overload. We've lost our freedom to know and to choose. Internet has given us so much freedom for information that freedom of choice has been lost. I have to tell you, a few years ago, I went to cinema in the afternoon, which I never do. Went to cinema, and it was empty, apart from 1 or 2 people. I did not know where to sit. I couldn't decide. The place was empty. I know I have to sit in the middle. Do I sit in the middle? Do I sit in the back? Where do I sit? I was stuck. I had no freedom. I had full freedom. I could sit wherever I wanted, but I couldn't decide. Okay, so there's lack of freedom through forced to sit where there are very few available seats, which is very nice. It's like China closing down information and the internet. So that's your choice, fine. But there might be too many seats, like what I experienced, which is what Russia does. It floods the airways.
Ну как это? Нет, тогда я не хочу.
Olga, I have to mute Olga. Russia floods the airways with massive amounts of false information, which is the opposite.
Ну позвони мне еще. Давай. Завтра или сегодня? Ну хорошо.
Okay. Absolute free. I'm coming to the end, folks. I know you all want to have a go at me. Absolute freedom implies infinite freedom, which is really weird because there is no infinity really. Besides absolute freedom conforms to freedom of the individual, which creates a paradox. Individualism creates a mass of individuals who demand their freedom. Each one wants his freedom. But hyper-individualism, which it is, dissolves community by negating its rules. If there isn't a belief that the community frames individual rights, liberty turns into anarchy and freedom dies. And just one thing somebody always says and drives me crazy is that the notion that people are born free. Of course, they're not born free. A baby is born free. Of course, it's not. He's born helpless. He's not free. We couldn't be less free than a baby is. We are, in Heidegger's words, by the way, thrown into the world. We aren't asked to be born. And it's even worse because we become less free as time goes on. And we become less free than not being free at all. So as time goes on, we become less free, not more free. Surveillance is ubiquitous. Surveillance is in the streets, it's in the shops, it's on our phones, wherever we are with our phones, that they know where we are. We are watched and followed, but we can't see the watchers. It's like a one-way mirror. Freedom from algorithm, don't make me laugh. This is subliminal slavery. AI, Terry, I have to mention AI somewhere. Are we enslaving ourselves by giving free rein to AI? Are we destroying ourselves by giving freedom away? Today, when we have more potential sources of information than ever in human history, steadily more people are led to a narrower view of the world by social media algorithms that keep them hooked and engaged by feeding them more of what they already think. We're all in our bubbles, and we hear things that we want to hear because those are the only people we actually get to. And they're feeding us more and more of it, and we think the whole world's like us, but it isn't, because there are other bubbles telling them something else. Nobody's free from this. We are stuck. So that I'm gonna, oh, I did well. I'm gonna give you a break now. So there's one thing I wanted to say. There is the chat. I forgot to mention that. Everybody likes to do chat. Some people are too shy to talk, which is okay. And chat is okay in theory, except that we can't see the brilliant things that you're writing down. If you cannot chat, I'd be delighted. I see the chat afterwards, by the way. So don't think that you can chat and it disappears. But the point is, please talk to us rather than chatting. And now I open the floor, and if you've got little hands, artificial hands, if you put them up, I will try to get to you one by one, and you can now have a go. I see, okay. Paul.
Right, that's great, that, Ron, but it seems to me the first thing we have to do is talk about the meaning of freedom. We've used the word freedom a lot, but we haven't talked about the concept. And that's where the problem lies for me. We can do all the sociology we want, but the philosophy, the notion of the word freedom, for me, it's a word that has no unique descriptive meaning, although it has lots of emotive force. And because it has no definitive descriptive meaning, the words is frequently used in all kinds of vague ways, while at the same time conveying strong emotive meaning. Freedom, well, we just think it's, but it's also invested with moral meaning, as though it's a good thing. Freedom is naturally good. Without the context, it's morally neutral. For example, if I say I'm for freedom, I'm all for freedom, vote for me. So people go, oh, he's for freedom, great, we'll vote for him. Until you find out what the freedom is for, freedom to do something harmful, or freedom from something good. It's a vacuous term at the very beginning. So that's why it has all kinds of problems. You know about the freedom parties. Too many people will vote for them without knowing what they're freedom to do what. Mug old women of a night to torture people. It's a neutral term. It isn't a good, automatically good. That's just the first thing I wanted to say about it. So I'll shut up now.
If I may just answer that before I get to somebody else. So of course I didn't define it for the very reason that you said. You can't define it. And there's nothing good, there's nothing intrinsically good about freedom. There isn't. So somebody's freedom if somebody's slavery. So freedom, like any other word, is approximate, and it depends on its context. Now it could be good to be free, but since nobody is, I don't know whether that's good or bad. But basically, okay.
If it could just finish my point,
Yeah.
and then I'll shut up then. Yeah, it gets this emotive force from the idea that if you look up in a dictionary, it'll say lack of constraint. That's what it'll say, and that's what freedom is according to the dictionary. But we know that isn't freedom. That's the conditions for freedom. Possibly, it's a negative form of freedom. It's not a freedom to actually have the power to go and experience the freedom, experience your power, and do something. So that's why it has this negative connotation to freedom from. You use freedom from quite a lot without using freedom to, an actual power, an actual experience of freedom. So freedom from isn't freedom. It's possibly the condition for freedom, but it's not freedom, not the experience of it.
Whatever,
Okay.
whatever that is. Okay. Bill.
Yes. You know, as I heard you present, I had in mind the distinction between your language about freedom and the behavior of being self-aware. Now, I understand, and I don't think anyone disputes, that we're all controlled by a lot of different things. And if control is the essence of lack of freedom, the absence of freedom, what is freedom? And it is the ability to perceive how we are controlled. It's the ability to get how we see ourselves in controlling contexts. And that freedom is always with us if we refine it, if we make something of it, if we shape it, because it is with self-awareness of the way we're controlled that we can develop systems of counter control. And that is the crisis of our time, is that people aren't thinking about that, in my view. So the freedom to perceive how we're locked in, how the system defines us, how we're controlled by others, is something that we have to want to change, maybe, because if we don't, we're going to be rolled over. And that is the problem of the lack of freedom, as I see it. And so it's the freedom to see how we're not free that is the essence of the game.
Yes, I agree with you, but I don't think we can see that, because the ones that are controlling us are being controlled by others who are controlled by others. And it's an enormous circle of control that there is no big brother. There are lots of big brothers, but they're also being controlled. There's a problem in thinking that we can get to reality to see what's going on, because I don't think we can ever.
Well, Ron, I just think it's a question of self-transcendence, and I can transcend my context. I can transcend my immediate situation. I can see how world manages me. That's all I'm saying. It's a quality of consciousness, not a question of how sweeping our controls are or who controls them. It's that awareness that is going to be the source of invention and innovation, to govern ourselves in different ways, to see opportunities to do that. That's all I'm saying. Freedom is the ability to see us in context. Ourselves in context. That's all.
Okay, fair enough. So you think that it's possible to objectively see what's happening?
I think I can see what's happening, whether it's objective or not, or whether it's influenced by some language habits that I have, or some biases that I live with, some perceptions that are probably wrong. I can do it.
That's okay. That's subjective but not objective. That's fair. I'm with you on that.
Okay.
when you're finished, put your hand downwards. I'll keep on coming back to you if your hands are not down. Thank you very much. Richard, good to see you. Can you hear me? We can't hear you, Richard. Richard, I can't hear you.
I didn't realize I'd gone mute. Oh, you must have muted me, Rich.
Never, never do that to you. Never.
Right. Okay. I was going to start by saying that we're born in certain positions, and we are, if you like, enclosed in a cage, one of Foucault's grills, from the time we start growing up and perceiving outside the world anyway. Freedom is not one of a platonic form. You can't talk about it. There are different freedoms and different things. But while you were talking, you mentioned homeless people, and it reminded me of the glass bead game. Now, I haven't read this for at least 50 years, but I seem to remember there was an Indian fable or myth at the end, which you'll hate, Ron, knowing your feeling about Indian philosophy. But in that, the young boy goes off with a guru, I guess, and he is presumably free because he is effectively homeless, relies on begging for food, and really devotes his life to devotion, I suppose. And then he meets a girl, and instead of staying like that, he leaves his guru, goes into the world of materialism, if you like, starts a family, gets a place, and so on. And it's only when he's very old, I'm sorry if after 50 years I've forgotten some of the parts of it, but it's only when he comes to die he realizes he's been bound by the possessions that he has and by the ties of love and family and possessions and so on, and that he was free when he was young and only wanted to leave the world. Now, to some extent, you'd have to become a Hindu or a Buddhist to care about that, because we don't believe we're chained by being reborn and so on. But the idea of freedom is really something that you can only talk about in a fable or a parable or a myth, if you like. There is no such thing as freedom ever. On the other hand, it is quite good to believe you're free, and we all compromise the freedoms we have. And I say freedoms advisedly because instead of being free, I'll take different freedoms. One's free to make an action, but you have to compromise for society. And I think COVID's shown that. The libertarians are not socialized. They are saying that you've got to be free to spread COVID or any other plague as you like. Whereas most people say that to protect other people, they're willing to give up some of their freedoms. And all of life is compromise, and all of life is this. But some of this is voluntary, and some of this is put on us from outside.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you very much. So now that there's we're going to have Michael and Roland and Claudio. Is that all right? So that you know, I know you're there. Thank you, Richard. Michael.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You moved from where you were.
Ah.
Yes, yes. Oh, you moved over. Yeah. You moved chairs. Okay.
Okay, good. So, Ron, I agree with a lot of what you said, but I have just a couple of brief comments. First, you are right in your notion of time, but with understanding that all that we know about the world, it's all based on our subjective experience. And this is also related to how we see time. So subjectively, we feel that it's going through us, that we can make some inferences about the future. You are right, of course, based on what we know about how our memory works, that it's all based on our memory, on our past experience, on all these neural networks, associations, and so on. But subjectively, we still feel that there is some sort of the future, and that we can do something about this future. But our subjective experiences, they are subjective, so they are different for different people. And that's why we sometimes have these problems when we try to agree on something and we find that other people have different experiences. But amazingly, still there is something in common between our experiences, because after all, we all are humans, we all have the same biology and to a large degree the same psychology. So we can develop some sort of collective subjective experience that is a part of our culture, and science is based on this. Although in science we call it measurements and observations, but anyway, still the same idea. But what follows from this, at least for me, that there is no such thing as absolute freedom or absolute truth or absolute whatever, that there are no absolutes. It's all limited to what we know, to what we feel, to our memories, and once we try to take something as absolute, we immediately run into either logical contradictions that are impossible to resolve, or in practical issues with this, because the absolutes cannot be practically achieved. And people are fighting wars for these absolutes, and it's really a big issue. And regarding the freedom in particular, that when most people are talking about freedom, they mean mostly individual freedom. But it's a sort of hierarchical concept. So we can talk about freedom of a family, a freedom of a nation, or a freedom of any social group to do whatever it wants to do, whatever it feels right to do. And so we routinely sacrifice our individual freedoms for a freedom of something larger that we consider, in some context at least, as more important than our individual freedoms. And so in this sense, yes, our freedom is always limited, but it may be limited for the sake of some maybe bigger freedom, which is also limited. So as I said, there is no absolute, and so it's not just this black and white, whether we have freedom or whether we don't have freedom. And it's also not black and white whether we can make some definite conclusions about the nature of freedom. So anything that we can say about this is limited. And the opposite statements can also be true to some degree. We just cannot claim that we are absolutely right. So that's my...
You're absolutely right in what you said. You don't need to convince me that there's no absolute truth or absolute anything. The problem is that some of us are getting stuck on the meaning of the word, and it does not help to open a dictionary. If dictionaries are where we get our information from, and that we don't need philosophy, we don't need to have this meeting. All we do is open dictionary, we'll find out what freedom is, what consciousness is, etc., etc. But that's not the answer. I mean, it just isn't. The fact that we all feel that we are free, and we know and we think that we can influence the future is correct. Of course, we feel that we know what's going to happen tomorrow, but that has nothing to do with it. The fact that we know what's going to happen tomorrow, and the fact that it might and might not happen, is something entirely different. We do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. We do not know. It's possible that things will happen tomorrow that we think about, but that's it. To say that we know that we ever get to the future, we never get to the future to prove it, because once we're in the future, it's already the past, and we're looking for another future. It's definitely problematic, and freedom is one of these words that you can't define. It's not supposed to be defined, and in fact, every single word is not definable exactly. It's only approximate, and it's approximate according to the context that it's used. And if the deeper you go into the word, the more confused you get, because eventually you don't know what you're talking about anymore. Everything is approximate, everything, including every single word. The only way we get along together is because we're using words approximately, good enough for us to understand, good enough, but not, as soon as we dig down, we are going to disagree. Immediately we get down to what it really means we're talking about, we will disagree. But that's words. Thank you very much, Michael.
But if we remember that we also have only a partial perspective and only partial understanding of any word, that can help us to at least to be less disagreeable and maybe to reach some kind of common understanding, and that we are doing actually every day.
Exactly. We do it every day because it's approximate enough for it to work. But that's it. Yeah, okay. If you put your yellow hand down now, Michael, so I don't see you again. Roland. Hello, Roland. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Great. Excellent, good. Gosh, it's a slippery bar of soap, this, isn't it? There's so many threads to follow. I've been making a few notes, but the more notes I've made, the more I think I'll just forget about those. I suppose the way I look at it is freedom suggests free from something. And so I suppose my first port of call is to say, well, free from what exactly? I suppose I could say free from some kind of control. But then to say that I'm being controlled by something, and therefore my actions are being limited, suggests that something is controlling me. Now, the word control is a problematic word because it suggests free will. Someone has the will to control me. And as I've never found any evidence of free will, I can't really accept that as an idea. So I would not follow that line of thinking. Instead, I'd go to what exactly would I need to do in order to notice that I have a lack of freedom? Well, I guess I would notice some kind of obstruction to something I wanted to do. That like I want to travel up the A12 to Lowestoft and I find that the road's closed and I'm no longer free to travel up the road. And it's the roadblock that tells me this. So it seems to me that freedom is only visible when we want something to happen, but we don't get to it, or we might not get to it. So it's referable to being obstructed in some way. So if it is referable to being obstructed in some way, what it then comes down to is, what do we actually want to do? What are the things that we want to do in life that might be obstructed? And in what way do those things balance with other things that other people want? So going past even that, I think to myself that this is something to do with identity, something to do with who people are in themselves and what they want and where they're going. And when we experience a lack of freedom, it's because there's something about what we wish to fulfill, who we see ourselves to be, that is being obstructed and thwarted in some way. So the question then comes, well, what does that mean? If I'm not actually being controlled because no one has free will, and yet I'm being thwarted nonetheless, that suggests to me that I've got the wrong end of the stick, that in fact, my expectations about freedom are actually misconceived. So it's essentially like a theory being falsified. One of my favorite ways of thinking actually about when what I want to happen doesn't happen, I just assume that I've got a bad theory about how the future will unfold. To me, the natural thing to do there is to abandon that theory and find something better that will actually work with the scenario that I've actually got to play with. I don't know if Terry is around still at the moment, but
yes, he came back.
I was thinking about this in relation to artificial intelligence. My understanding is that artificial intelligence is very good at giving up failed behaviors, possibly not so good at creating new ones. Whereas human beings are terrible at giving up failed behaviors, are very good at creating new ones when they've managed to give up what they want. So I suppose it's a different take on things, that I see freedom as more the ability to respond to change, the ability to let go of things that don't work and to find other ways of heading towards what you want or redefining what you want. But that in turn will always depend upon who we are as people at that moment, what we want. I guess there's an issue about this came up with someone I was talking to earlier today, about how far ahead we look. And there's a great quote, which I won't read, well, maybe I will at some point if I have the opportunity later. It's a quote by Ruskin that I love. It's in the front of a book, a bunch of books that I've got that were published in the early 1900s, which were practical guides for working craftsmen. And it relates to how we see the future and what we embrace in our sense of identity. And essentially it was saying something on the lines, and I hope I'll be able to read this later because Ruskin put it a lot better than I'm going to paraphrase it. It's something on the lines of the thought that when we do something now in our lives, to do it on the basis that looking forwards into the future, it's something that our descendants will look back on and go, thanks for doing that, guys. So something on the lines of identity is strongly connected with freedom, and how far ahead we cast that net of identity will then depend upon what we do now, and in that sense, what we get frustrated over and what we don't. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's yes, identity. That's a good point. Claudio, and then Frank, you've got a little hand, an artificial hand. No, that's not artificial. That's real. Do your hand so I can see it. Otherwise, no, not that one. Claudio, no, Claudio. Claudio,
Yeah. Yes. I think a lot of geneticists and psychologists would agree with you, Ron, when you mentioned earlier, but all we have is our past, because it's most of our experiences, our memories are all in the past, and just the present is non-existent, and the future is unknown and mysterious. And not only that, they said that our future behaviors as adults, our thoughts, our thinking, our emotions, they're strongly influenced or determined by our childhood experiences, right? Our memories, and also things that happen to us physically, like, for example, head injuries. So they see it as the free will is non-existent in that, because they've done extensive studies, these people, right? These experts. So we're not truly free about how we behave as adults, because based on what happened in the past, our memories, although we don't remember most of our memories, they are buried in our subconscious, and it is our subconscious that strongly influences our decisions, what we do in life, how we behave, and so on. So in that way, we're not really totally free. However, the society has implemented certain mechanism, tools, or methods to give us freedoms in certain areas of our lives. For example, like Abramson earlier says that we shouldn't deal with absolutes. like we can't be totally free, but people seek freedom in certain areas of their lives. For example, like addictions, like alcohol addictions, gambling addictions. In order, they want to free themselves for that. They try, but they can't. So that's why we have, for example, Alcohol Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, to help people overcome their addictions. There's also, I guess, medications for that. People want to free themselves from depression, anxiety, right? Because it can be enslaving, right? It prevents you from achieving happiness. So society have come up with the so-called solution, they believe. Let's say antidepressants, they work, right? So people feel happy again. The religions come up with mechanisms to deal with, for example, depression or loneliness. People join churches, or the Hindu religion says you can find freedom from attachment by practicing yoga, although only a few people can reach nirvana, right? So that's kind of like restricted, because it's not easy to achieve nirvana or practice yoga effectively. So there's certain mechanisms that societies implement to allow people to achieve certain freedoms, not in the absolute sense, as Abraham mentioned earlier. That's important. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. I think Terry was next, and then Melinda, okay? No, I can't hear you. Terry, I can't hear you.
Melinda was next.
Oh,
I was
thank
well
you.
after her.
You're a real gentleman. Sorry, I didn't notice. Well done. Melinda, sorry. Your turn.
Thank you, Terry. By the way, we lost Kathy, who had her hand up for a long time, but she seems to.
Who has?
I think her name was Kathy. Anyway, she was on my screen with her hand up. It's hard to facilitate and be the leader of the discussion. That's true. So I forgive you, Ron.
You're very kind.
Aren't I kind?
You're invited again.
Well, thank you so much. So this is fascinating to me now as an artist. I think about freedom in different ways. And I just want to explore a little bit this notion of the impossibility of the future. Certainly, certain artists are able to conceive of possible futures that have not yet happened. And certainly, like sci-fi writers can conceive of a different kind. Let's look at Dune, of a different kind of world in which we live, and then follow the mental structures of that to creating visions of possibility, of things that are not yet perceived or possible. But mostly what I wanted to comment on the discussion, because I'm not a philosopher as much as I am an artist, I think one thing that's really very important is the recognition that we are all social beings, that we are born into a social setting with a certain set of beliefs, that through our life situations or our own internal explorations, we can explore other sets of beliefs, especially about freedom and what is freedom. So I would say that with the sense of social being, art is more an impression of reality than an expression of reality. However, the doing of art is the expression of reality and freedom. So in my mind, as this relates to freedom, if we leave out the sense that we are all socially tied in some kind of community and are not completely independent in our ability to think about what is freedom, I take just a little concern over the sense of we never get to the future, because, Alec Baldwin, if you pull the trigger, you get to the future. And I don't know if people in Europe followed that, but there was this terrible thing. So anyway, Ron, I know you want to talk about this. Wait 1 second. Finish my thought, and then you can correct my fallacious thinking. But my thinking here is that we certainly get to the future. We perceive the future. We get to the future in terms of actual reality, of things that have already happened. So we can perceive that. So I think we're getting caught up with what is future and what is now. And future and now are these impressions of time. And time we're only perceiving as linear. And I don't think, especially for artists, time is necessarily linear. The future doesn't necessarily happen next. The future may have happened before. So we can get to the future by a complete enough imagining of potential futures. And then you have a movie or a play or a poem that makes that a concrete reality. So I think it's difficult to think of freedom without thinking of the continuous now. And I think that's what art is. So that was my main comment. I think we have a continuous now that has the ability in many humans to conceive of a future that is real enough that we can forestall the most dire effects if we make social decisions rather than individual decisions based on our previously imagined reality of the future, which I think is as real as the real future. That's my point. Thanks, Ron, for waiting for me.
With difficulty, I got to tell you.
I noticed.
Difficulty.
Difficulty. See, this is a good lesson for you.
It's
To
not.
wait for the future until the future arrives. But the future hasn't arrived yet. So if you argue that we never get to the future, you never get to talk again.
Oh.
But I'll be here all week. Thank you.
An imagined future is as real as the real future. That's what you said. What can I say to that? So, Katie, did you have your hand up before? Oh, okay, Frank.
Yeah, okay. I just want to bring the discussion down to earth a little and say we're all humans. And I would say that
some of us more than others.
Some of us are more human than others. And I would say that the idea of the concept of what we're talking about today, freedom, is really, you can say it's like happiness, the pursuit of happiness. It's something on the horizon, and we all know that it's a positive quality. It's a quality of life. And without defining it, each one of us knows that we accept it or we are content with it when we see something which is rather inferior or more negative to the state we are in, the current state of happiness. For example, we can take extreme examples. Viktor Frankl, the famous psychologist, even found freedom in the mind in Auschwitz. I mean, that's an extreme example whereby he defines his freedom in a completely extreme state. And then we have to look at freedom. I mean, how do we look at freedom through history? Freedom through history has always been in contrast to slavery. The whole of the Western world, from the early Greeks, even before, from Babylon, from the Israelites, have always been based on the idea of slavery until the 19th century, we could say. And therefore, we could really understand the quality of freedom in relation to slavery. And I mean, if we look at the concrete examples, just open the Bible and you'll see in Exodus, right? What was the main message of Exodus? Let my people go. Let the Israelites be free from slavery to freedom. And therefore we have constant examples. The early Greeks spoke of freedom. But on the other hand, we know that most of the people who lived in the Greek polis, the Greek states, were slaves. And therefore each one of us knows really what the idea of freedom is. And I think if we all remember the film or the story of 1984, that once again brings us down to earth. What is freedom? Freedom is obviously very subjective, but it also depends on the context and on the time. But we all have something in common here. We know that it is a positive quality, and we can only understand it in relation to a more negative quality. That's what I really wanted to say.
No, you're absolutely right, because you can only understand something as against the opposite of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact
everything's
that,
in contrast.
Yes.
All our life is in contrast,
yes.
And therefore freedom itself is in contrast.
Yes, but that does not make it necessarily good. It only makes it good for the ones who think it's good.
Yes, but I think it's an accepted norm in humanity that freedom is a positive, is a value, it is positive. I mean, if we say it's not, then we're going against the norms of humanity and humanism.
I'm not sure that freedom is always good. I'm actually not sure that sometimes, I think sometimes we don't want absolute freedom. I think children.
You said there isn't absolute freedom. You're contradicting yourself.
No, I don't think there is. I think that each of us thinks of freedom in a different way, the way we think of everything else in a subjective way, as Michael said, that freedom means so many different. You mentioned the Greeks. They were very enlightened people, except the majority of the people there were slaves, and freedom was great for the Greeks. Not that great for the slaves, mind you, but they saw freedom as wonderful, and everybody who's free thinks is wonderful. There are people who, I'm sure there are people living in the streets. There must be somebody who says, I like this life. I am free. I don't have to go anywhere. This is wonderful. Don't you think that would be possible?
And once again, it's subjective.
Exactly.
But anybody who says he likes freedom sees it in a positive light. He is content with the idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Okay, Terry. Sorry, I've been waiting a long time.
No problem.
That's because it's only because you're a gentleman. Otherwise, you'd have spoken by now.
I think I'm actually about where I should have been in terms of turns. I put up my hand pretty late.
I can't. I don't know who's up first and who's up second. Sorry.
Okay, you can hear me okay, right?
I can. Yeah, I have no freedom here at all.
All right. Well, first I wanted to put in a plug for the viewpoint I think expressed mostly by Melinda. And I don't know if this is in contrast to what you said or not, Ron, but the future to me is unbelievably important in terms of the concept of freedom, simply because if we cannot imagine a future that's different, then I don't even know what freedom means. Then we just become mechanisms. We just say, whatever is, and down that path we go. So I just find it, and if you talk about how people conceive of freedom, they always invoke a freedom, a future of some sort, a future where, let our people free and we are no longer slaves. So it's very difficult to conceive that. Now, I agree with your point here. I don't think I'm contradicting it, but the future is not the reality. But I think the formulation of where the future can be is incredibly important to,
I agree.
Not just to freedom, but
yes, it's the absolute. I hate not the word absolute. Sorry, it is what we all believe. Approximately, we all obviously believe in the future, but that's part of us being human. But I tried to get below that and say, yes, that's part of what there is the freedom to believe will happen. The fact that I have a theory that says, and I can prove it, that you'll never get there, however much you want to get to the future, you will never get there, never.
Yeah, sure.
That's
but the reason I invoke the future in the context of freedom is also reflecting back on what both William and Roland talked about, that, and this is my artificial intelligence background coming in again. One of the things that is incredibly difficult to do with a computer is to make it see new futures. Really, really hard to do. So hard to do that that's the reason when anybody says they've got a general artificial intelligence, they're lying to you. They don't. None of, despite all the power and all the things they do and all the amazing voice recognition, all that, it's all just perception. It's just mechanized perception. Just, you know, imitating what humans do in terms of understanding. But in trying to imagine something, that is really tough. And there's probably a technological reason we don't understand yet. I could get into a whole thing about how bits make us less free in some way. So just to point that out, I think that's a really interesting and I think a powerful definition of what it is to be free in terms of saying, recognizing what I'm doing that is causing me to do this. And in keeping with that, one comment I want to make, someone, I think, Ron, you mentioned at one point, people thought they're free if they were completely rational. I would pose the exact opposite. The people who think they're being completely rational are the most bound and unfree people imaginable because they're completely oblivious to what's really happening. And there have been extensive studies about just this point. This is not just an abstract concept. This is a studied issue. People who think they do nothing but rational decisions are frequently the ones who are most bound and most predictable, which shows that they're not really free in terms of what they will do. Their emotional biases just completely swamp them. They excuse it as saying, I'm being rational, when in fact, every rational decision, how was Spock being rational? How can you be rational if you have no goal? You know, you say I'm rational, well, what? Rational is a generative process. It just takes a bunch of rules and expands them. It doesn't say where you're going in that huge space you just created. It doesn't tell you what's going to happen next. It doesn't tell you what you want to do. Rationality is generative. It's not goal-directed. It doesn't tell you anything about what I want reality to be. So again, going back to what William and Roland said, the ability to select and say, I can change something. I can do a difference. We don't understand how that even works. You get all these issues about free will, determinism. Oh my gosh. You throw in quantum to make it even messier. We don't understand it, but clearly we can do something. We can't do it perfectly, we can only do it approximately, but somewhere in there, there's an ability to navigate into a future that is better. And I think if that future includes the idea that fellow human beings are worth quite a bit and that every one of them should have a chance to do something, I think that's a very, very nice goal. Now, other people might disagree with that, but most of the cases where people say we're not free is because some other human being decided, I want you to do exactly what I want you to do, and nothing else. North Korea being the most extreme and most horrifying example of that in modern times. Maybe not the only one, but boy, it's a dilly. So the idea that said, no, each person has some value and they should have a chance to see what they can do, and they should be encouraged to see what they can do. So a goal of freedom, of making other people free, I think is a nice, you know, people can argue about this, that, and the other, but it's certainly one that I like. That's a good goal. So again, I just like to say, I think it's a fascinating problem. How do we make ourselves less bound by what has been encumbering us? And the first goal is you always have to recognize I'm encumbered. If you don't recognize that and you call yourself rational, you are anything but. You're anything but. So that's my yapping.
So Terry, you reckon we're all free, basically?
No, just I thought I just said no.
I'm just wondering, are we? No, but you're saying we are free to imagine what we want to and to go ahead.
I think there is an ability in humans that we can get. We can either extinguish that or we can bring it out. And I think art is a major part of how we do this. When we talk about art and about imagining new worlds and creating new worlds. And I do say that we have that ability. Some of us are going to be better at it than others. But to say that that makes us free, no. I mean, we can extinguish that like a candle. We can just go, and that's it. So in that sense, then we just become more mechanical.
But
it's easy to do the mechanical part. We do it with computers all the time. That's why I say it's easy to take that route. And we can do it as humans. We try to instruct other humans. You do exactly what I say, like a computer, and everything will be great. Well, maybe great for you. How about for the other people? That's what slavery is. You are my machine. Stop telling me that you have anything about it.
But isn't that the problem that that each of us wants to be free to do what they want?
Yes.
But to be free to do what you want means that other people are not free because you're treading on their freedom. It can't work.
No. That's a zero-sum game. The world is more complicated than a simple zero-sum game. The idea, the Trumpist concept that I've got to grab everything because that's the only way I can get anything. The feudal mentality of grab, steal. It's just absolutely not validated by any economic model of what actually happens in reality. North Korea versus South Korea. North Korea, they took that model. South Korea, they took a model that is freer. And my gosh, look at the contrast. Try to get a video. There are a couple of videos out of North Korea. They're horrifying. And then the pleasant, very human videos you can find coming out of South Korea. So, we have to make some choices in some of these things. And I think the choices do make a huge difference when we go with that. Oh. And I don't think it's a zero-sum game.
You're going into choices
interactions, now. It creates new opportunities that weren't there before.
Okay.
But choices are the way freedom manifests itself.
Melinda, hang on.
I know, but
you've got to hang on. You've got to hang on.
I'm defending Terry's point of view. That choices are the way we manifest ourselves, and they're not determined entirely by self-interest. Sometimes choices are determined by, for lack of a better word, humanity, ethics,
compassion.
Yeah, compassion. Yes. If someone gets hit by a car, how many people stop to help? This is not the anticipated freedom, but this is the momentary, in the present reaction or action to the world as it is at that second.
So why is it that not everybody stops?
Why is it that some stop?
Exactly. That's my question.
Ethics.
That's exactly my question. Some people stop and some people don't. Why? Why? If there's compassion, everybody would stop, but they don't.
Because
some people do.
Condition.
Exactly. No. Yes. Exactly. Some people are conditioned. Some people have a past, and some people have a past that allows them, and they stop, and other people don't. There's no choice here. There's no choice. This is nature. And you're saying
it's not nature. There's always choice. It's socialization.
There's choices. I have a future that I want to see to be better than
I'm
that.
sure you do. We all do.
Only has, and there have been changes in future. Not every society is the same as every other one.
Exactly. That's my point.
You're saying so everything is random. People's decisions are based on, and it's all random. There's no some rule that people do stop or not stop when there's an accident. I'm asking you, Ron.
Oh, me?
If you say there's no rationality or there's no decision there, then
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't say there's no rationality. I said that whatever one does is due to what happened before, and nobody can kid me that that there are real choices. Because having a real choice, it means you've moved out of nature. You're completely taking yourself out of everything that's happened before. And some people stop and some people don't. And those who stop are good and those are bad. Yet the person who stops and the person who doesn't stop have got different backgrounds. And you can't get away from it. It's no point saying that I would like everybody to be great. I want everybody to stop. everybody won't stop. They won't, because some people have got
Most
a different background. And if you don't take that into account, then I don't know what's going on. In that case, there's no nature, there's no nothing, there's no past. It's just that people are reacting out of what?
Ron, I just gave the example of South and North Korea, and how can you say it makes no difference what people choose?
I didn't say it makes
There's
no
an
difference.
enormous difference between the
I didn't say it
societies.
makes no. I never said it makes no difference. North Koreans can't choose what they're going to do.
Exactly.
That's my
But the South
point.
Koreans can,
So,
and that's why it worked out a lot better for them.
No. The South Koreans can't either, because if the North had won, the South Koreans would be the same as the North, and nobody would make the right decision as far as you're concerned. I've got to get on to Paul Morris, who's been waiting so patiently for so long. It's not fair. Hang on, everybody. Don't get excited. I'm not getting excited. It's freedom. You're all free to. You're
Well, the
all
whole
free.
point of this is
Yeah,
to get excited.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
It's our choice and our freedom to get excited, and everybody here's got a different opinion, and I wonder why. If you've all got a choice, then how is it that we all got different opinions? It's because of nature, because we've been affected. And for you to say that the North Koreans are doing what, Terry, the North Koreans are doing what they want because they, for some unknown reason, I don't know what it is, where the South Koreans are doing what they want for another reason, then they've been conditioned, they're under different conditions. The fact that, I mean, how can you possibly say that people do things that are not conditioned by what happened before? It beats me. I don't understand it. Boris.
Because the choices I make as a person, where I have some capability where I can say that discrimination against Orientals in the United States is one of the most horrifying things I've seen in our government, and I shout loudly as I can, say, stop doing that. Believe it or not, it does make a difference, and people do sometimes stop doing it.
Sometimes and
So
sometimes
you can't
not.
tell me that it doesn't make any difference when we see a goal of a future that's better, and we try to work for that, because it does. We can make a difference. And if you just go into total nihilism and say, oh, it doesn't matter.
No, never said it doesn't matter. I said we live in nature, and nature has affected us. That's all I said. I haven't talked about good and bad at all. It's not the point. Well, the things that you think are good might be bad for somebody else. And the fact that you think you're good, which you are, as I know, the fact that somebody else says he's good and I think he's bad has nothing to do with anything apart from the fact that I see things in a different way to what anybody else does. It's just nature. That's what we are. I mean, for anybody to say that we're not is beyond me. I don't get it. Morris, quick, get in before somebody else leaps in. Terry.
Well, you'll be asking yourselves why I waited so long to say whatever it is I'm going to say, because it's terribly small. First of all, can you all please calm down a little?
We are very calm.
We're getting carried away here.
Of course we are. It's about freedom.
Anyway, I want to just say one very small thing and ask a simple question. The first thing I want to say is that Frank was talking before about, let my people go, freedom. And I just want to continue in the same line of thought there. Maybe some of you perhaps know that in Judaism, it is considered that the yoke of the divine ordinances, that is the laws which appear in the Torah, this is a yoke which those who wish to accept it put upon themselves, and it controls every single tiny little thing in their lives, from birth to death and 24 hours a day. Everything is controlled by it. And it is said that this is the only way to achieve freedom. It would sound a little bit like North Korea in some way, except, and in fact, when Terry was talking about North Korea, I had in mind this idea that because things are so orderly there and so everything is decided for the people, perhaps they are actually much happier. and it's a better way to live. And certainly an Orthodox Jew would say the only way to be happy is to keep all of the ordinances and not to stray this way or that. And this is the only way to achieve freedom. And it's freedom from all the other things which might drag you in other directions. But that's one thing that occurred to me. But the other thing, I wanted to just ask a simple question. Is it possible to have an original thought? I mean, this is not an original thought, I just point out to you. The question arises because it seems to me that if it's not possible to have an original thought, it's because everything we think about is based on our past. That is something we've heard or learned or somebody said to us, or a thought that we had yesterday. On the other hand, if it is possible to have an original thought, where does it arise from anyway? From our freedom to think. If we have freedom to think anything we want, and we end up by thinking the same things that we've been thinking before or somebody else thought before, well, there wasn't much to that freedom. So is it possible to have an original thought? That's all I want to say.
That was not little. That was very good. That's very, very interesting. I think, no, it's a good point about North Korea. Sorry, Terry, but it is possible for, I think, for people to be happy if they know that they have to follow certain things. They don't have to worry. That's the point you're making, Maurice. Yes. Yeah, I think that's reasonable, isn't it? So, Olga, I can see you now. Well done, Olga, and then Roland. Okay.
Hi.
Hi there, Olga. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I really admire you that you discuss so messy subject, not afraid to discuss it. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, okay. So unfortunately, I have to leave soon. So I really like this comment. I don't remember who it was who said that probably we could not notions like freedom should be discussed only relatively, like maybe through fable. And if we talked about, for example, all like traditional ancient knowledge or religion, they usually discuss these notions only through the fables, through examples. And I just wanted to give my definition of freedom, and of course through example. And first of all, what you absolutely correctly said, that it's all our definitions, all our terminology is relative. It does not, it's not precise enough to understand what is actually is. And when people talk about freedom, they usually talk about protection for doing something, and not detachment, but attachment. I want to do something, and I want society to protect me to sit all day on computer. It's my freedom, or something else. So it's usually we talk about protection because we cannot be free from our body, for example. And if we cannot be free from our clothes because of weather or something else. So we always have something to depend on. And when we talk about freedoms, we want protection in many cases, societal protection to do something. I want to do it, and I want you protect me to do this. I want to do this right. So it's very messy. No, it's very messy. It's can be really precisely discussed. And my definition of maximum freedom that we could have, and it's when you naked in the woods, eaten by wolves. This is maximum freedom that you can have. All other, it's different level of protection for doing something. That's it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Olga. Thank you.
Okay. And I unfortunately, I have to leave in like maybe 5-10 minutes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for coming. See you next time. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank
Roland, you've been very patient.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, there was a few points I wanted to take up on what Terry said and also what Morris said, which I thought would be quite interesting. Firstly, I want to say, Terry, I was so with you on the issue of the generation of new ideas about the future, new behaviors. This is an area I'm really interested in at the moment because of my work in behavioral change. And I think the ability of the difficulty human beings have in actually letting go of existing behaviors that don't work is a huge problem as far as allowing the possibility of a new future, a new behavior to arise. So that's an area which I feel is actually possible to turn into a fairly precise science. So I'm quite interested in the dynamic between that and artificial intelligence, because it seems to be that artificial intelligence has exactly the opposite problems to deal with than human beings. So that's one thing. I also wanted to take up that interesting dynamic between Terry and Ron about free will and making choices, because I feel that to me, I completely reject the idea of free will simply because it's another causation argument where you have to draw the line and say, before I made this decision, there was nothing. And that does not make sense to me. However, what did make sense to me and what Terry was saying is you can have a goal, some kind of intent for the future and work your way towards it. That makes perfect sense. But I don't think that's a matter of choice. And I think this is where also this idea connects with what Morris said, because he was saying, what about original thoughts? Where do they come from? Well, we must have original thoughts because otherwise we would have the same science now as we did 2000 years ago, which we haven't. We've got very different ideas and they must have come from somewhere. So what's going on there? Well, what I see happening is that when we head towards some kind of purpose, we will come across obstructions. And it's those obstructions that provide us with the energy, with the fuel to change a behavior. Because by actually experiencing the failure of our existing behaviors and letting them go, we have in us this amazing capability, which Terry hinted at as well, to generate behaviors out of nowhere, completely new approaches to things. And I know this to be the case because it's central to the work I'm doing at the moment, and I see it every day, that an apparently stuck issue suddenly turns into something completely different. And very often when there is a change of behavior, the conceptions about that behavior and about what's being aimed for have subtly changed as well, sometimes radically changed. So I think that is where inspiration does occur. When something is frustrated, the frustrated behavior is let go of, and something else has room to grow in the soil that remains, or rather, it's a bit like a phoenix coming out of the ashes again. So I felt that tied in with what Maurice was saying about original thought, and also another point that Maurice made was about the saddling of the yoke of some kind of religious responsibility, or even, I mean, the same thing would happen on a quest of any kind. And I wanted to say this this is a very common practice in many esoteric processes, where a person is expected to adopt an unbendable intent, an intent that cannot be under any circumstances dropped. And the function of this is not simply to pursue the intent, but to hone the capability of the person who has that intent to actually change their behavior. So essentially it's a behavioral re-education tool. And once that skill has been acquired, it ceases to be difficult to follow that intent, because you have the capability of changing your behavior in order to get to it. So, and I've seen that in quite a few different disciplines across the world now. I think that was the only things I wanted to say that I've made some notes about. Yeah, but I hope in some sense that may rationalize the Ron Terry issue, because I think this issue about making choices is maybe a language thing, because I don't think we can make choices in the sense of selecting from nothing. But what we can do is we can confront obstacles in our path, which will bring us to a grinding halt. And then something happens that allows that obstacle to change. And it's not choice, it's something else. I'll stop there.
Michael, is your hand up?
Yes.
Okay. I'll get back to you on that, Roland.
Yeah, so I'd like to comment on two issues. One is about moral significance of freedom, and another is about free will. I mean moral significance in the sense that, as you said, there is nothing inherently good in having freedom. And in some sense, you are right that when people have to make too many choices, it actually inhibits the ability to make decisions. And there is a lot of research that confirms this. So in practical sense, we don't need to have all the freedom to do whatever we want, because it's more important to have freedom to understand better what we want. And freedom, I consider, like historically, it was rather instrumental value. So our ancestors needed freedom to survive and to connect to others, and that also was important for survival. And of course, this required to have a freedom to make certain choices. And since this was so important for survival, then for most people now it becomes the value on its own right. So we value our ability to make choices when it comes to really important things for us. And I just recently ended reading the book Nudge, where they also discussed this issue of multiple choices and how to help people make good choices. And the best strategy, in their opinion, is to make the reasonable default choices and make the choices easier, rather than to allow or to force people to make choices all the time, and that's really not helpful. But another point is regarding free will. What I found interesting, that people who take some measured and reasonable positions on other issues, but somehow they express very strong emotions regarding the free will. Either they insist that we all have it, or they reject it outright, that no, we don't have a free will. Yeah, but what is interesting, that I am a physicist by background. And even in physics, the laws of physics can be reformulated in a way that actually describe the physical processes as making choices, choices under constraints. So like a system can choose the path of least resistance or the least energy and so on. And most of the time, these constraints are so constrained that the choice is the only choice. And this is when we are talking about deterministic behavior, but not always. And even in classical physics, I am not even saying quantum physics, this is not always the case. And it can be rather an exception than a rule, because in many situations, system does not have the only possible behavior. It has to choose. And that's why we cannot predict the weather. Because it's not deterministic, even although this is an entirely classical system. But irrespective of this issue of prediction of someone's choices, so if I cannot predict your choices, this does not necessarily mean that you have a free will. Maybe I just don't know enough about it. But there is another sense in which we have something that it's reasonable to call a free will. Let me phrase it so carefully. And this is the sense that we have multiple or complex determination when we are making decisions. And there are some pressures from here and now. This is what like environment or what other people want us to do. And there are also our own values, our own history. Yes, this is all sitting in our memory. So it may be entirely deterministic, but still we may be free to make choices that go contrary to this external pressures from here and now. And you cannot deny that we have this freedom. And it can be entirely compatible with determinism. But I don't also think that we are entirely deterministic. I just don't think that this is possible for so complex systems. You can design very simple physical system, mechanical system that will be indeterministic. And this is the whole notion of strange attractors. It's 3 nonlinear equations and you get it. You have the behavior that does not appear to be deterministic. So as with freedom and with free will, I don't think that any absolute position would be justifiable. And there is also another argument in favor that even if we cannot theoretically prove that we have a free will, but when people are convinced that they don't have free will, this has a negative effect on morality of decisions that they make. So there is also a practical argument in favor of acknowledging of reality of free will. But again, with all these caveats that it's not absolute, that it's all depends on everyone's personality and so on, but still.
Thank you, Michael. There's no doubt, as far as I'm concerned, that everybody believes they have free will. Everybody believes that they can do what they want whenever they want. If they're allowed to do it, you want to cross the road, you cross the road. You don't want to. Melinda thinks that she can paint whatever she wants to because she wants to, without any influence from anywhere. That's okay. I don't. That's fine. That's part of human nature. Everybody thinks they can affect the future. They can affect the future until it gets to the future, and suddenly they realize, oh, that didn't happen. Oh, what happened? But I knew it was going to happen, and it didn't. Now that's also something that happens to happen. Yeah, we can affect the future until we see that it didn't actually happen. We were 100% sure, 100%, and it doesn't happen.
Well, everyone thinks that we can affect the future because we know from our experience that we can affect the future.
No, we
and
don't.
we would not survive otherwise.
No, we don't. We
could not
don't.
do this.
No, we don't know. No, we don't know that we affect the future. What we know is that we think that we can affect the future. And then when it happens that we don't have, when we haven't affected the future, then the future we never got to, ever, because the future became the past and it was different. So everybody believes they can affect the future. That doesn't mean that they can. Belief is belief. But nobody.
A bit of a false dichotomy.
No,
are you saying that there's no influence of the future as opposed to 100%? No prediction comes out 100% correct.
I agree, exactly.
But would you say that you can influence the future whatsoever?
Influencing the future is one thing, but actually getting to what you influenced, no, you can't, because you only know when you've reached that. And when you've reached it, it's not the future anymore. It's the past. You say, "Oh, I did it, or I didn't do it. It didn't happen." The will part, I will do this, will always be will, because when you get to it, it will be the past. That's the only way you can judge it. You can't get to the future and say, "Oh, I'm now in the future." Yes, of course you can influence. We all influence each other. You influence me, I influence you. That's okay. But I can't say what you're going to do in 10 minutes. I have no idea. And if I say to you in 10 minutes you're going to get up from your chair and you do so, and 10 minutes you don't, I don't know. If you've got a dentist appointment at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then you go there and 100% you know you've got that appointment, but I
never know that.
Exactly. That's my point. We agree.
And that's where I think, Ron, we're actually in complete agreement.
I agree.
We were saying it very differently.
I agree. I agree. We're in exact. It's a.
We can influence the future, but we don't know what it is.
Exactly. We agree 100%. We always do.
Okay.
We're gonna, before you all drop off somewhere. I've got two things I want to. Where is he? Maurice and Roland. You both mentioned something very interesting, which of course I will argue with. Obviously, that's my function in life. Now, the Maurice, you asked something that stopped me for a second, but only for a second. You said, where do original thoughts come from? And Roland answered it, but Roland was not correct. That there are no original thoughts. There cannot be. And Roland, things do not come from nothing. They don't. That famous thing about standing on the shoulders of famous men, etc. That's the one. But that's
I didn't say they came from nothing.
You did.
No,
I have a recording.
Cause and effect, my friend.
If I said nothing, I didn't mean it absolute nothing. What I meant was that once a behavior that doesn't work is abandoned, there is a pause where it's not possible to see what the next thing is, but something emerges out of it.
But not out of nothing.
It's every day. No, it's not out of nothing. It's out of our nature, obviously.
Okay.
But it is as though the intent that we have, it like pulls out a new behavior that was not there before, was not visible before, was not active before, is created spontaneously. That's what I meant anyway.
Okay.
I certainly don't mean that it comes out of nothing, because that's the same as free will.
Yeah, okay. I know that's it. That's but I thought that what you said, I thought you couldn't have said that, so I wanted to clarify it. So back to Maurice. Maurice, hello. The original thought is a very good question, because but there are none, because they're based on what happened before, and it's like lots of Lego bits, and you put them together differently. And,
yes, Ron, but you're talking about Ron in 2021. If you were a Neanderthal man asked the same question, you might well say, oh, wait a minute, I've got to think very carefully, because this thought I'm going to think now is going to be the one that all other people's thoughts are going to be based on for the rest of the history.
You're wrong, Morris. You know why?
Well,
Neanderthal man is now extinct.
No, it's not. It's not that.
Somebody must have had an original thought sometime.
No.
God.
No, we don't have original thoughts, and artists don't do original things. Sorry, Melinda. I know it's going to annoy you, but that's my function. Okay. If I didn't annoy you, you wouldn't come back, right? I have to annoy you, right? So.
Out of interest, sorry, Ron, what are you saying original means in that context?
I have no idea. I don't know. That's the point.
Is what you're saying original?
I want to say something in Melinda's favor. I think in art, there's a tremendous amount of originality all the time, built on the human imagination. It is coming out all the time. I've never seen such innovation.
But nothing. But when they try in films, movies to you lot, aliens, right? And they have never ever had an alien that does not have parts of everything that we know. It's always one eye here and head thing. There's no originality apart from what there is in our imagination before, and otherwise we'd have much better films about aliens than we do at the moment. All we got is an eye up here, or a big head, or a small head, or whatever it is. But there's nothing there that we have not seen. It can't be done. And as much as I admire art, and I do, no, seriously, I do, and you know it. But original art is simply using stuff that's been done before in a different way, or take it all away, or put it all in, or put a hand coming out of your ear, or whatever. These are all great. They're all different, but they're mucking around with stuff that we've already got in there.
What is the meaning when somebody comes up to a Michelangelo original and says that is an original?
Because he's done it better than anybody else. What do you mean?
Because he has created it.
Yes, well, he's created, he's done a copy of a face or whatever it is, and so amazingly, you say, that is absolutely great. Why is it great? Because it looks like a blinking photo, just done nicer. I'm sorry, I know I'm sounding very cynical, and Melinda will kill me for all of this, but I mean, I'm talking about originality, and
fortunately, my original thought is not to kill you. But to think of other ways to torture you.
You're succeeding, by the way.
I know. That's why I'm grinning. But can I ask one quick question of Michael? You mentioned early, I loved what you were saying, Michael, and you mentioned a book, I think. Was the book called Nudge? What was that book that you mentioned? Nudge, N-U-D-G-E?
Yes.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Thank you. I want to look that up.
Cass Sunstein.
Say it again.
Cass Sunstein is the author.
Thank you. Well, you know, Ron, just on the original thought idea, there had to be some connect. You know, it's an idea of. I'm formulating this as my mouth is moving. I think it's an idea of taking observable, or I'm even going to use this word, intuitive imagery, thought pictures, and putting them together in a way that allows them to act within the physical and mental world in a way that hasn't been experienced very completely. So I think you or someone talked about the original dichotomy between freedom and slavery. And so the challenge there is that slavery was considered a condition that was an acceptable condition in the human world until recently. And so there has not been the singular original thought, but there has been the communal thought over time, which really, I think this whole thing coming back to freedom also talks about time. So it's a thought over time that has developed among enough energetic beings to actually influence the real world actions of sentient and energetic beings. So as we adjust, and I'm really interested, Roland, in what you were saying too about human behaviorism, because I'm in theater. And so theater is about motivation, and motivation is about need or desire or whatever those emotional states. Motivation is emotional at its core. So I think what we've left out of this discussion is the emotional core of sentient beings that influences behavior over time into the future to the extent that sentients begin to believe otherwise. I will take feminism too as an example of that. The first thoughts were that females were not capable of a level of thought or action as those who were perceived male, until there was a thought that maybe an individualized conscious sentience could be both or neither, or somewhere on this concept of spectrum of being. So it interests me that as we certainly stand on the shoulders of giants, the giants also had dwarfs, and there was a change in consciousness of what is real and what can be changed. So I think racism, sexism, homophobia, the original thoughts that there are some beings that are lesser than other beings, is something that is changing because, and I'm finally getting to my point, we can envision a future that is different, that isn't now, but that in theater, we ask the question all the time, what would happen if? And so you insert into the if, what would happen if equality actually existed? What would happen if people were less afraid of others killing them? What would happen if violence became not a naturalized state? So the question, I want to return to the question of freedom for a second, because freedom certainly is an evolution. At least we've experienced freedom as an evolution, and freedom has expanded, I think, as our ability to conceive of who or what is worthy or can actually wield freedom. So I think it's a very interesting question that we are dealing with right now. I go to Terry's thoughts about AI and algorithms and this prediction of what we ought to do next, and how capitalism is based on these algorithms of predicting what consumers will want to buy or to use or what we need. And when the ethical statements of freedom are inserted in the predictive nature of contemplating behavior, I think that that's when behavior changes. And Roland, forgive me, I have no training in behaviorism, so I'm probably just talking out my butt. But what seems to me, what we're calling an original thought, is the ability to combine things that seem to, one, have no relevance to each other, and two, not only have no relevance, but are impossible to achieve. But it seems to me that the impossible to achieve is what creates the future. That there is something that some wonder about, well, why is it not possible? Let's figure out how it is possible. And that's where each step of the process of becoming an organism that is more aware of the sentience of Earth in the grandest sense. Now, we haven't lived on another planet, or at least most of us. Maybe Ron lives on another planet, but most of us live on this planet in this time. I would say that all of us live right this moment on this planet at this time. And yet we conceive of a future that would be even better for those of us who are not yet living on this planet at this time. So I know I'm delving into kind of ethics and feeling, but I think feeling the desire to, Maurice, I think you also were mentioning things like this, the desire to make a world, to participate in a world that in the future is better than the world that I sit in at this moment, better for more. So I would just suggest that freedom, the idea of conceiving of a future which is better for more, is kind of the heart, as it is, the beating circulation of freedom, of the freedom to create that which is yearned for. That's the end of my little treatise. Thank you very much. I won't hear.
I can't argue with a word of that. It's terrible. Thank you. That's very nice. Bill, you got your hand up, right?
To take up on Melinda's point, which I think is very interesting, but I probably with a much more mundane example. When you're confronted with a problem that you can't solve, as Roland suggested, you have an obstacle. And you don't jump to a choice right away, but you go through with an insight process. And if you puzzle and muddle and go through it again, you might come to an insight. And you say, well, what can I do to fix this? A function of the future. What can I do for changing the future? Well, you can implement that insight in terms of a choice to settle a problem. And isn't that the simple issue? We always, when we solve problems, influence the future. Future that is now a now that is puzzling, that is confusing, that is blocked, that is prevented from having an outcome that we want. But if we want to go through an insight process, we come to an outcome that we like, perhaps. And I think that happens on all levels, even the most mundane levels about what to put on the shopping list, or what to do in the situation of a lawsuit, or what to tell the client, or what to do if you're a doctor, a diagnosis. All those kind of things are simple issues of influencing the future by having an insight to solve a problem that you haven't solved yet. I don't know. That seems simple to me. And if it isn't, maybe I can hear from someone else to say, you got it wrong.
Thank you. Terry, do you have your hand up?
I do, but Claudio's been waiting much longer than I have.
Oh, you're such a gentleman, it's unbelievable. I'm sorry, Claudio, yeah, is your hand up or is your hand up again or still up from before? Claudio?
No, I just put it up. I prefer Terry go before me. Go ahead, Terry.
Oh, okay.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And I think I just completely lost my train of thought by doing that. William just talked about, I was going to say something about what William just said.
Insight.
What was your last point, William?
Yes, insight
What was
is
your last point?
change the future. We change futures by implementing insights to solve problems.
Okay. And one suggestion I was going to make, it kind of follows off that line, where science is all about influencing the future. If you think about it, that's all science is saying, how do we do a better job of influencing the future and use that in some way? So I tend to take that perspective, but you talked about originality, whether there's new thoughts. What I would suggest is what we actually wind up doing is building layers of new complexity that make new thoughts possible. And that's a little bit different take on it. I'm not saying that it is a new thought, but as we build up a new set of ideas, they catch hold, they take root, then all of a sudden we can say things that literally could not be said before because there was no framework in which to say them. Now, I don't know if you want to call that originality or freedom or what, but I do think that that is very much in fact that we see all the way up from the structure of our chemistry, up through biology, up through organisms, through some of the computers, through the art, is you cannot say certain things because there's no way to say them until you get to a certain level of general acceptance, of sharing, and then all of a sudden, that to me is original, and that to me is part of freedom. It's not all of freedom. I know there's a much more complicated, but I think the ability to get to a level where you can create something that was never created, you can say something that literally could not have been said, is an aspect of what we should be aspiring to, apart from the ethic thing, just because if we don't, then I don't know, it's why we're just kind of a bit of a machine work on how things are going with it. One comment about original thoughts. I think they're from muses. So they're, well, let's go back to the Greeks. What I mean by muses is that it's an effect that goes on when a person has a highly original thought, that you go back and you look at your own work and you say, who wrote that? I have no idea what that means. Now, if you've ever had that experience, it is a fascinating and kind of strange experience. But I understand why so much of mythology talks about muses, because if you've had a highly creative idea and you go back and you, the person who wrote it, goes back over it and you say, I don't understand what I just wrote. And then you work on it for an hour or so and said, oh, that's what I meant. And then you may spend days or weeks to write it into a paper. And so this is, I'm intentionally using the muse just because, first of all, we said the Greeks, but also just I've found this phenomenon is often, oddly enough, documented in science. People just say like, well, all of a sudden, it came together, and we do it usually enormous preparation for doing that. So in terms of creative process, this idea of being amused, being enthused, of having inspired, all three of which are saying the same exact thing, that something hit me that I don't understand. And somehow that popped out. And I just find it intriguing. It's one of the reasons why in computers, we have no concept of how that would even work, what that would even mean. So we certainly don't understand our own biology very well, how this is going. And unless you think otherwise, I'm not literally invoking muses as real deities, but I am invoking the effect of the muse, the inspiration, the enthuse. A muse is kind of an interesting derivation, a muse. We don't mean it the same way. But so in that sense, I think there is something kind of creative going on there. It involves something I don't think we know about. But the bit stronger thing I put is those layers of complexity, because that's something you can point to And you can just say in a very matter-of-fact fashion, until this level of complexity grew, until this level of complexity was accepted, you cannot think that. Even the colors in our rainbow could not be thought of a few thousand years ago because there was no terminology, there was no set of concepts for things like blue. Blue's always the last one. Red's always the first one. Surprise, surprise, blood and everything like that. But we don't realize how much our concept, our framework influences even what we can conceive of. Blue is just a version of black for most people, most of human history. So, you know, it's interesting how much of an effect that can have on us. So that's enough of my yakking.
You're advocating something extremely dodgy, as we say in English. That was
dodgy.
Dodgy means, what does dodgy mean? Strange and weird and
intentionally so.
What you're just saying is something that was said in the 40s and the 50s of the last century, by the way, that language influences thought. And that's a very dodgy, again, a very strange thing to say. It goes against most things that people would like to accept today, because if you're saying that if you don't have the language, then you don't have the thought, and that's hugely problematic.
Oh, absolutely, I'm saying that.
You are, or you're not?
Absolutely, I'm saying that. I'm saying that until you get a certain level of development of concepts in which you can actually frame the sentence, of course you can't say it. How would you?
And it's not a matter of saying it, you're saying you can't think it. And
right.
You do realize that you're saying that people in the jungle, for example, do not have certain thoughts because they can't say it, and therefore they have a less developed nature than people in New York.
The framework that we develop, the languages that we develop allow us to expand in certain areas. And there are sets of concepts in which every one of us would be dead within a day or so if we're in the jungle, because we didn't have the incredibly developed concepts of the people who were living in that particular environment. So good heavens, no. I mean, we have different languages for different areas that we're applied to, but the capability of us to learn those languages and develop them is always there. And it's one of the reasons why freedom is so important, so that people have an opportunity to do that and to give an extent where they can express what they are. But I do say that
Terry,
you have the concept, yeah.
Terry, can I offer you an example of exactly what you're talking about? I agree with you completely. I saw an art exhibition about a South Sea island. I don't remember which island it was in the Pacific somewhere, where when the ships with the sailors, the explorers arrived at the island and they were anchored out in the bay, the locals did not see them there because they had never encountered a ship before, and they couldn't see the ship because they didn't. They said they didn't know how to talk about it. There was no word for it. The whole image, the whole concept did not exist for them until the sailors came ashore and clobbered them over the head.
There's a weird little American film called What the Bleep Do We Know?, which was a bunch of physicists and scientists, and they used exactly that example, Maurice, of the shaman had to come to the coastline and really look and meditate before he could see the ship. And he saw the ship finally by the wake that came aside on the shore. That was different. So the observation of the change in the wave pattern on the shore, which I think is such a great symbol, the change in the wave pattern. Terry, you should talk about the change in the brain wave pattern, allowed that conceptualization to make sense in the writer. What the bleep do we know? It's a funny little film. It's weird.
If you look in the full history of people like Einstein, which I found out greatly, it really is Einstein, not Einstein. He was so into so many philosophers and reading that, and people who say that philosophers aren't important to science. Oh my gosh, read a little bit of what Einstein actually did, because he relied enormously on one. Ron and I have talked about how his dependence on Hume, which has been often forgotten, and it was critical to him coming up with special relativity. So we build on these concepts, and if Einstein had not had access to that work, it wouldn't make him a primitive out in the, in the jungle. It's just that you have to get those tools, you have to get those pieces, just like in a tool shop. You have to get the right drills and saws. It's hard to construct new items if you don't have any of that kind of background.
But isn't that what isn't that what I said, that nothing comes from nothing? It's all built on something.
Yes. And that's where and as I
okay,
mentioned before, I think we're in complete agreement on that, because I'm saying we both said you can influence things, but you have to have those tools, and that's what it's built from. And no disagreement at all.
Also, I'll add one more artistic thing, because that's my role here, is the incredible Kate Bush has a song called 50 Words for Snow. And it's a very interesting song about conceiving of this phenomena that we call snow, with different metaphors that create a whole different kind of, not different, but augment our conceptualization of snow. And somebody smarter than me, what's the word for the study of the root of words? Is it
etymology? Etymology is the history of.
Yeah.
Etymology.
Well, I think it's semiotics or something like that. But anyway, etymology is the history. You're right. The derivations of words. I remember reading some book somewhere that talked about the derivation of sounds like drumming that turned into words. So that there were different words, 50 words for snow. There were different words for different effects of what those of us who aren't in that community just think of as drumming. But there's, and those sound waves were used for different purposes. So without knowing anything about sound waves, Terry, as you were just speaking to, without having the concept of sound waves, cultures came up with this thing that we now call language, words, to express realities.
Oh, sorry.
I'm done. Go ahead, Ron.
Nice reverb on that one, Ron.
I happen to be a linguist. That's my
okay.
That's my
so
stuff.
I just spoke out my linguistic ass.
I gave a great deep sigh when you said that. I don't think that's how language came about, but what do I know? I'm just a linguist. Well,
what do you know?
Not much, but language apparently, but this just apparently, it's a part of the human being that has the inner ability or some sort of biological something inside that creates language, and it's the other way around to what you said. It's not that people saw things, put language to it. Language is there that animals do not have, but that humans have. If humans are,
so you don't think that animals have language?
Oh dear, I don't want to go into that. That starts well, if you want to know, no, but I'm not going to go into that because that's even worse than free will. You tell an animal lover that animals don't have language, they'll kill you. But we're not going to go into that. That's not today's topic. No, I don't. But that's it. No, I don't. And I've had lots of animals, and they do not have language. But I know you think they do, but it's okay. Language do.
But they're still able to communicate, the animals.
Yeah,
even though
okay.
They have a language, right? Even plants can communicate with each other. There's different forms of communications. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's
But okay, let's not go into that. Has anybody got anything to say before you know, we sort of whatever? Everybody okay? Thank you very, very much for Claudio. You want to say something?
Yeah, I had my hand up for quite a while now.
Oh,
I let
okay.
I let Terry talk because he usually has a lot of interesting things to say.
Everybody
But
does.
everybody, yes, everybody's here. Maurizio and Melinda, William, and everyone. Yeah, somebody mentioned Einstein. So, like, didn't Einstein believe in the black universe, where the future, the present, and the past existed simultaneously? So, if it's true, I'm not saying it's true, then everything is kind of like deterministic, isn't it? The future is set; it already exists. It's out there. Even the past, the events of the past. You know, oh, somebody, the black universe. I don't know who came up with that. And
Einstein is the main person.
yeah, yeah, but like you said, Ron, like not everybody desires freedom, and I think total freedom is undesirable. It can be also harmful, right? We need not only the laws of nature to constrain like movements of organisms on a microscopic, we also need laws from society to protect us. And these constraints also give rise to more favorable freedoms that are progressive and helpful, right? Like traffic laws, for instance, is one example that allows us to arrive from point A to point B safely, and it also allows us to feel free when we're driving, free from fear, right? Free from harm. And also you have, like, America has gun laws, it has a police force that constrains our freedom in a way, but it's also helpful, it's for our own benefit. It allows us to reverting from the Wild West, right? It allows us to protect ourselves, our families, our property, the gun laws, the police force, the laws there. Although they take away certain freedoms, they allow us new freedoms, more important freedoms, and it prevents us from people from acting on their impulses, right? Also, the laws of nature, they constrain us, right? You got the four forces, you got the gravitational laws, the electromagnetism law, the strong forces and the weak forces. They prevent the subatomic particles and quantum particles from doing whatever they want. They have to follow a certain rules, these deterministic laws. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist, right? If matter wouldn't be able to clump together, and the human beings wouldn't be able to realize the freedoms that they have now, right? So there's constraints on our freedoms give rise to greater freedoms that allows progression to go forward. Melinda mentioned evolutionary freedom, right? But it's these evolutionary constraints that give rise to these evolutionary freedom, right, in human beings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Claudio. I'm going to finish off with one sentence from Voltaire. Doubt is an uncomfortable condition, but certainty is a ridiculous one. That's from Voltaire. So can keep that in mind till next month, when we'll have another quiet, simple discussion about very, very little, as we did today. And thank you very, very much for coming. It was a great pleasure to have you all, and I hope to see you next month. So
nice to see you all.
Bye,
I do
everybody.
have to comment that Bill just communicated with his dog without language, probably, but communicated nonetheless. When the dog came in behind you, Bill, and went to the door, and you turned around and did that, and the dog and you looked at each other, and something happened.
Love was in the air. Da, 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 da.
So,
Bye, everybody.
communication was in the air.
Bye, everybody.